For my husband's 32nd birthday, my parents surprised us with an expensive vintage watch. The moment I saw it, I went completely pale and screamed, "Don't touch that." He thought I was being dramatic until I explained what that watch really meant. When the truth came out, it destroyed my family forever and made me realize my parents had been using me as their personal insurance policy for years. I cut all contact that night, and I've never regretted it. Let me paint you the complete picture, because the details matter. It was a Tuesday evening in March. The kind of crisp Colorado night where you can still smell winter in the air but spring is whispering promises. Our apartment in Thornfield, a quiet suburb of Denver, was warm and glowing from the candles I'd lit earlier. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy. Just the kind of evening that makes you grateful for simple things. Marcus had just blown out the 32 candles on his chocolate birthday cake, the one I'd spent 3 hours making from scratch because store-bought felt wrong for his birthday. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 2, and I'd learned that Marcus appreciated effort more than expense, which made what happened next even more bizarre. He was still grinning. Chocolate frosting somehow smudged on his chin despite not having taken a bite yet. When the doorbell rang, long, insistent, like whoever was on the other side had been waiting a while, I frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Marcus shook his head, equally confused. "Maybe it's Mrs. Kellerman from downstairs. She mentioned wanting to borrow our ladder." But when I peered through the peephole, I saw the familiar brown uniform of a FedEx delivery driver. A young guy, maybe early 20s, holding a package and checking his phone like he was running behind schedule. I opened the door, keeping the chain latched out of habit. "Hi. Evening delivery for Marcus Chen," he said, holding up a small, elegant box that looked like it had been wrapped by someone who charged by the hour. "Sorry it's so late. Special delivery request. Special delivery. On a Tuesday night. For a birthday no one outside our immediate circle even knew about." I unlatched the chain and accepted the package, my eyes immediately drawn to the return address label. Phoenix, Arizona. The familiar handwriting that belonged to my mother, Patricia Holloway. Neat. Controlled cursive that looked like it belonged on wedding invitations. "Thank you," I managed, though my voice came out strange. The driver was already jogging back to his truck, eager to finish his route. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, staring at the package like it might explain itself. "Who was it?" Marcus called from the living room. I carried the box back to our coffee table, setting it down carefully next to his birthday cake. The contrast was striking. My homemade chocolate creation with its slightly lopsided candles, next to this professionally wrapped package that probably cost more to ship than I'd spent on ingredients. "It's from my parents," I said, and even as the words left my mouth, they sounded wrong. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Your parents? Really? That should have been my first red flag. Actually, it should have been a parade of red flags marching through our living room playing warning songs." My parents, Patricia and Robert Holloway, had never, and I mean absolutely never, sent Marcus a gift. Not for his birthday, not for Christmas, not even when we got married 2 years ago in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. They'd attended the wedding, sure, smiled for photos, made polite conversation with Marcus's parents, David and Linda Chen, who had flown in from Sacramento and immediately treated me like I'd been part of their family for decades. But gift-giving, that wasn't their style. At least, not when it came to Marcus. "They've never sent me anything before," Marcus said, voicing exactly what I was thinking. But he looked genuinely pleased, maybe even a little touched. "That's really sweet of them." I watched him reach for the package, and something in my chest tightened. It wasn't rational, it was just a gift from my parents. But Marcus didn't know my parents the way I did. He didn't understand the careful calculations behind every gesture they made, the way everything came with strings attached. The way generosity from Patricia and Robert Holloway always had a price. The box was heavier than it looked, wrapped in expensive cream-colored paper that felt substantial under my fingers. Real wrapping paper. Not the kind you buy at the grocery store. There was a small card attached with a gold ribbon, my mother's handwriting elegantly spelling out Marcus's name. "Should I open the card first?" Marcus asked, and I realized I'd been staring at the package for longer than was normal. "Sure," I said, settling onto the couch next to him, trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up my spine. He opened the card carefully. Marcus was always careful with things like that, the kind of person who saved wrapping paper and folded it neatly for reuse. Inside, my mother's perfect cursive read, "Happy birthday, Marcus. We hope this serves you well and brings you many years of happiness. With love and best wishes, Patricia and Robert." Even their card message sounded formal, like something you'd write to a business associate rather than your daughter's husband. But Marcus smiled, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That's so thoughtful of them," he said, setting the card aside. "They really didn't have to do this." But that was the thing about Marcus. He saw the best in people, always. He assumed good intentions because that's how his own mind worked. The Chens were generous, straightforward people who gave gifts because they wanted to show love, not because they were playing some elaborate chess game. My parents, they were different. I watched Marcus carefully unwrap the box, his long fingers working gently at the tape and ribbon. He was taking his time, savoring the moment, and I found myself holding my breath for reasons I couldn't explain. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was 31 years of experience with Patricia and Robert Holloway. Maybe it was the way my mother's voice had sounded the last time we'd talked on the phone, too bright, too cheerful, like she was performing happiness rather than feeling it. The wrapping paper fell away to reveal a black leather box, the kind used for expensive jewelry. It was elegant, understated, with a small gold clasp that caught the candlelight. Marcus looked at me with raised eyebrows. "This looks fancy," he said. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Open it." He lifted the lid, and the breath left my lungs in a rush. Inside, nestled in cream-colored silk, was a watch. But not just any watch. A vintage Rolex Submariner, the kind that collectors fought over at auctions, the kind that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The black face gleamed under our living room lights, and the steel band looked like it had been polished to perfection. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Holy shit, Emma, this is..." He caught himself, glancing at me with wide eyes. "This has to be worth $30,000, I whispered, the words falling out of my mouth before I could stop them. Because I knew this watch. I knew it intimately, had seen it in photographs and insurance documents and police reports. I had helped file the paperwork when it was lost. I had held my mother's hand when she cried about losing the last piece of my grandfather. This was my grandfather's Rolex Submariner. The one he'd bought in 1962 when he got his first big promotion at the engineering firm. The one he'd worn every day for 40 years until he died when I was 15. The one my grandmother had left to my Uncle Thomas when she passed away 3 years later. The one that had supposedly been destroyed in a house fire at Uncle Thomas's place in Flagstaff 5 years ago. The one my parents had collected $30,000 in insurance money for. The room started spinning. My hands went cold, then hot, then cold again. All those conversations came flooding back like a dam had burst in my memory. My parents crying about losing irreplaceable family heirlooms. The insurance paperwork I'd helped them fill out, translating their grief into forms and claim numbers. The photos I'd helped them gather, the very photos I'd taken of this exact watch when we were documenting Grandpa Joe's belongings. "Don't touch that," I practically screamed, lunging forward to slam the box shut. Marcus jerked his hands back like the watch had turned into a snake. "Oh, Emma, what the hell? What's wrong?" I stared at the closed box, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. The birthday cake sat next to it, the candles now just sad little stubs in the frosting, and the normalcy of the scene made everything feel surreal. "Did I do something wrong?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle but clearly concerned. "Is there something about the watch? Is it cursed or something?" He was trying to make light of it, but I could hear the worry underneath. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. Because if this was what I thought it was, and God, I was almost certain it was, then everything I thought I knew about my parents was about to shatter into a million pieces. "Emma?" Marcus reached out to touch my shoulder, and I flinched. Not because of him, but because my entire nervous system was in fight or flight mode. you're scaring me a little here. What's going on?" I forced myself to look at him. Marcus, with his kind brown eyes and his chocolate-smudged chin and his genuine confusion about why his wife had just screamed at him not to touch a birthday present. Marcus, who worked 60-hour weeks as a software engineer, who had never cheated on his taxes, who returned extra change when cashiers made mistakes in his favor. Marcus, who had no idea that the beautiful watch in that box was stolen property. Not stolen in the traditional sense, my parents weren't cat burglars, but stolen nonetheless, fraudulently claimed, illegally possessed, and now sitting in our living room like a ticking time bomb. "That watch," I said slowly, my voice coming out cracked and strange, "belonged to my grandfather." Marcus blinked. "Okay, that's nice. Family heirloom kind of thing." "It was destroyed in a fire 5 years ago." I watched his face as the words sank in. "My parents collected insurance money for it, $30,000. The confusion in Marcus's eyes shifted to something else, understanding. Maybe, or the beginning of it. But he looked at the box, then back at me. "But it's right here." "Yeah," I whispered. "It's right here." We sat in silence for a moment. The weight of what this meant settling between us like a third person in the room. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic on Colfax Avenue, the normal sounds of a Tuesday night in Thornfield. Inside, everything had just changed. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "are you telling me that your parents committed insurance fraud?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Insurance fraud. It sounded so clean, so technical. It didn't capture the betrayal, the years of lies, the way they'd used my grief over losing Grandpa Joe's watch to make their deception more convincing. I thought about all the times they'd mentioned the fire, how devastated they'd been. How my mother had called me sobbing the night it happened, describing the flames and the smoke and watching Daddy's watch turn to ash. How my father had said it was like losing Grandpa Joe all over again. I thought about the insurance investigator who'd called me as a reference, how I'd vouched for my parents' character. Told him they were honest people who'd suffered a terrible loss, how I'd provided photos and documentation to support their claim. I thought about the $30,000 check they'd received 6 months later. How they'd used it to pay off credit card debt and take a vacation to Europe they'd always wanted. How they'd thanked me for helping them through such a difficult time. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible. "I think that's exactly what I'm telling you." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I recognized from when he was processing something complicated at work. "But why would they send it to me? That doesn't make any sense. If they were trying to hide it, that was the question, wasn't it? Why give it to Marcus? Why risk exposure? Why involve us at all?" And then, like a puzzle piece clicking into place, I understood. "They're not hiding it," I said slowly. "They're laundering it." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean, think about it? If they kept the watch, someone might recognize it. My Uncle Thomas might come around asking questions. Other family members might remember it. But if they gift it to you..." I felt sick as the logic unfolded in my mind. If they gift it to you for your birthday with a card and everything, then there's a paper trail showing they gave it away legitimately. And if anyone asks about it, they can say they don't have it anymore. They gave it to their son-in-law. Clean hands? I laughed, but it came out bitter and sharp. God, they probably even get a tax write-off for the charitable gift. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the box like it might spontaneously combust. "So what do we do?" That was Marcus. Even faced with evidence that my parents were criminals, his first instinct was to figure out how to handle it together. We, us, Team Chen. I looked around our little apartment. The home we'd built together with second-hand furniture and student loan debt and love. The birthday cake I'd made with my own hands. The man I'd married who was good and honest and didn't deserve to be dragged into my family's mess. "I don't know," I admitted. "But Marcus, don't touch that watch. Don't wear it, don't move it, don't even breathe on it until we figure out what we're dealing with." Because I was starting to suspect that this watch was just the beginning. If my parents were willing to commit insurance fraud and then involve us in covering it up, what else were They hiding? What other lies had I helped them tell? What other crimes had I unknowingly been an accomplice to? The candles on Marcus's birthday cake had finally gone out, leaving us sitting in the dim glow of our living room lamps. The gift box sat between us like evidence at a crime scene. And somewhere in Phoenix, my parents were probably having a normal Tuesday evening, completely unaware that their carefully constructed deception was about to blow up in their faces. Or maybe they did know. Maybe they were counting on it. To understand why that watch sitting on our coffee table felt like a bomb waiting to explode, you need to understand my family. You need to understand the perfectly constructed illusion I'd been living in for 31 years, from the outside. Patricia and Robert Holloway looked like the American dream wrapped in a neat suburban package. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for a medical device company. Mom taught 3rd grade at Sunshine Elementary in Phoenix. They lived in a beautiful split-level house in Scottsdale with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. They attended St. Mark's Episcopal Church every Sunday, volunteered at the local food bank during holidays, and sent tasteful Christmas cards every year featuring professional family photos. Marcus had met them exactly 4 times before that Tuesday night. And each time he'd come away impressed. "Your parents are so put together," he'd say, "so stable." If only he knew. Growing up, I thought we were middle class, maybe upper middle class. We weren't rich. But we weren't struggling either, or at least, that's what I believed. My parents were masters at maintaining appearances, at making everything look effortless and successful. I had my own bedroom with matching furniture. I took piano lessons and played soccer. We went on family vacations to places like Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. I got a car for my 16th birthday, not new, but reliable. When it came time for college, there was money for tuition at Colorado State University, where I studied accounting because Dad said it was practical and recession-proof. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that I was too young to understand then. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the way bills would pile up on the kitchen counter before mysteriously disappearing. The occasional months where we'd eat a lot of pasta and peanut butter sandwiches, followed by sudden windfalls where Mom would come home with bags from Target and announce we were going out to dinner. "Your father got a bonus," she'd explain. But even as a kid, I noticed the bonuses never seemed to correlate with any particular achievement at work. The pattern became clearer in high school. Dad would get excited about some investment opportunity, a friend's restaurant, a multi-level marketing scheme, cryptocurrency before most people knew what that was. He'd talk about how this was going to be the big one, how we were going to be set for life. Mom would get nervous, they'd fight in whispers, and then a few months later, Dad would be sullen and quiet while Mom made phone calls about payment plans and extensions. But somehow, we always landed on our feet. The mortgage never got foreclosed. The cars never got repossessed. The lights never got shut off for more than a day or two, and when they did, it was always explained as a mix-up with the utility company. I thought my parents were resilient. I thought they were survivors who knew how to navigate life's ups and downs. I admired their ability to bounce back from setbacks. What I didn't realize was that their resilience came from a willingness to bend rules I didn't even know existed. The first time I suspected something wasn't quite right was during my sophomore year of college. I was home for Thanksgiving, and Mom was making her famous stuffing while Dad watched football in the living room. I was helping in the kitchen when she casually mentioned that they'd had to make an insurance claim on Dad's laptop. "What happened to it?" I asked. "Oh, you know how clumsy your father is." Spilled coffee all over it. She stirred the stuffing with more force than necessary. "Complete loss," the insurance company said, "but they're cutting us a check for the full replacement value." I nodded, thinking nothing of it, until I went to use Dad's destroyed laptop to check my email later that evening. It was sitting right there on his desk, working perfectly fine. When I asked about it, Dad laughed it off. "Oh, that old thing? I managed to get it working again after we'd already filed the claim. Lucky break, right? Now I have a backup." I was 20 years old. I didn't understand insurance fraud. I didn't understand that lucky break was actually a federal crime. I just thought my dad was resourceful. That should have been my wake-up call, but it wasn't. Because when you grow up in a family where small deceptions are normalized, where creative problem solving is praised, where everyone has a story about beating the system, you don't recognize the signs of larger criminal behavior. Instead, I learned to admire my parents' ingenuity, the way Dad could talk his way out of speeding tickets, the way Mom could return items to stores without receipts by spinning elaborate stories about lost paperwork, the way they both seemed to know exactly which rules were suggestions and which ones actually mattered. They taught me to be responsible, but their version of responsibility was selective. Pay your taxes, but maybe round down a little on your income. Follow traffic laws, but speed limits are really more like guidelines. Be honest in your relationships, but white lies to corporations and bureaucracies don't count. It was a twisted moral code, and I absorbed it without question because they were my parents. And parents are supposed to teach you how the world works. Marcus's family was different. David and Linda Chen had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1970s with 2 suitcases and a dream of opening their own restaurant. They worked 18-hour days for 20 years, saved every penny, and built their small chain of authentic Chinese restaurants through pure determination and integrity. When I first met them, I was struck by their straightforwardness. They said what they meant what they said. If they couldn't afford something, they didn't buy it. If they made a mistake, they owned it. If someone overpaid them, they gave the money back. It was foreign to me, this radical honesty. But it was also refreshing. With the Chens, I never had to decode hidden meanings or wonder what they really wanted. They welcomed me into their family simply because I made Marcus happy, and that was enough for them. The contrast between our families became apparent at our wedding. Marcus's side of the church was filled with restaurant employees who'd become like family, longtime customers who'd watched him grow up, community members who genuinely respected and admired his parents. My side was smaller, more formal. My parents' friends from church, a few colleagues, some neighbors. Nice people, but the relationships felt surface level, like everyone was playing a role instead of actually connecting. During the reception, I watched David Chen give a toast about love, commitment, and building a life together through honest work and mutual respect. It was simple and heartfelt, and it made half the room cry. When Dad gave his toast, it was polished and witty, full of clever jokes and perfectly timed pauses. Everyone laughed and applauded, but I noticed he never actually talked about me or Marcus or what our future might hold. It was performance masquerading as sentiment. That night, after all the guests had gone home and Marcus and I were alone in our hotel room, he said something that stuck with me. "Your parents are fascinating," he said as we were getting ready for bed. "They're so smooth, like they could sell ice to penguins." I laughed, taking it as a compliment. Dad's always been good with people. "Yeah," Marcus said, but something in his tone made me look at him more closely. I could never tell what they were actually thinking. Like they were always performing instead of just being. I defended them. Of course, they were my parents. But his words planted a seed of doubt that would grow larger over the next 2 years, watered by small inconsistencies and strange moments that I couldn't quite explain. Like the time Mom called me crying about their financial struggles, only for me to see Dad posting photos on Facebook from an expensive golf resort the following weekend. Or the time they needed to borrow money for car repairs, but then bought a brand new outdoor furniture set a week later. Or the way they always seemed to have detailed knowledge about insurance policies, warranty claims, and legal loopholes that most normal people would never think to research. I explained it all away. They were private about money, they were good at finding deals, they were just complicated. But sitting there on our couch, staring at that watch box, all those small doubts crystallized into one devastating realization. My parents weren't complicated, they were criminals. And I had no idea what else they'd done, what other lies I'd believed, or how deep this rabbit hole went. The birthday cake sat forgotten on our coffee table. Candles burned down to nothing. While I tried to process the fact that everything I thought I knew about my family had just revealed itself to be an elaborate fiction. Marcus reached over and took my hand. His fingers warm and steady against my cold skin. "Whatever this is," he said quietly, "we'll figure it out together." I wanted to believe him, But I was starting to suspect that figuring it out was going to destroy everything I thought I knew about my life.